Hello and welcome. In a previous lesson, I mentioned Workflow 4, Core, Assets, Level 1, and these are Three Footsteps by Pavel, Dungen, Multistory, Dwarven Expedition, and My First Fantasy Game. I will cover each of these in greater detail later on in the course. First, I will do a quick overview of each and why they are important and useful, and after I've covered Workflow 4, Core Level 1, I will cover much more functionality with a lot more other things. So, starting with Three Footstep System, I'm going to use Dungeon, Multi-Story Dungeons. We're going to go to the Dwarven Expedition with a V, which is free, and then finally my first fantasy game, Light, which is also free. So Dwarven is free, that is free, Pavel's free, Dungeon costs money, Multi-Story uh, costs money. There's going to be a Black Friday sale coming soon, but then there's also spring sales and summer sales to try and get it, and also Humble Bundle sometimes does it. So let's get on with the Three Footsteps system. So in Three Footsteps, we can grab the demo, and from the demo, we hit play, hope it all works. I'm using, what's my third back here? I've got up here first person. We're going to be using first person one. The third party controller, the camera movement's a bit janky. We'll be doing some other third person stuff. So we've got various things. It's based on textures, which is incredibly good. This is just really, really useful functionality and gives us a controller as well. So in Asset, we're going to create a new folder called First Person Create Folder First Person. And we're going to grab from First Person, we're going to grab that, but before we do that, we'll go to Inspector. Inspectors first. We're going to make sure it's enabled. First Person Controller, because if it's not enabled, it won't see it. So we should grab, and then the Footsteps database. And we're not going to save that because we don't want that to be enabled all the time. That's only for us. These are the two things we're yoinking from that. That gives us a rig for first person and a Footsteps database that we can then edit. And in the Footsteps database, we've got registered textures and prime surfaces, and somewhere along the line, we have the definition of the sounds, all of which we will do in detail later on, and we'll put our own footsteps in. And it's a beautiful, amazing, elegant solution. So we grabbed that, and that was the Three Footstep system. Feel free to explore it and play with it as you like, but that's the only stuff that we need to move on. Moving on to Dungeon. Okay, so Dungeon Crawler. We've got Crawler. We can't cover that somewhere else. I've got some demo scenes somewhere. Integration. Right, we do. At some point, we're going to use Sector Viz, Unity Nav, and possibly A Star. Not sure about Playmaker or Rain. But those are the integrations offered. Samples. Alright, well, I'm not even going to spend too much time going through the samples because the best sample, and I have done it in another lesson, gone through the different samples that you can play with. But what we really need to do is move quickly onto multi-story and find, let's have a look. We've got mobiles, PC, linear, I can't remember which one it is, so edit, what's the default? Project settings, player, see somewhere, gamma. So I'm not going to re-import everything, I'm going to stick with gamma. You feel free to put it in other settings in player, in project settings. But so we want multi-story gamma. If you're set up as linear, use the linear one, but we want multi-story gamma, we double click that. And we should have done the read first, because I think there's something else we need to do as well, which is, so we import that. So that's uncompressing the multi-story dungeons. Right, so read first. Double click it. Go to Assets, Import Package, Custom, select the one you want. Assets, Import Package, Custom Package. Okay. Anyway, we're sticking with this. Multi-story dungeons 2. Scenes, first person. We're going to stick with the first person demo, so we're going to don't save. Alright, I'm not sure we're going to get anything to play. Or maybe we will. No, because it's not even a controller for it. So, let's have a look. First person demo. Oh, okay. Well, what we could do is have a quick look at it by whacking in first person controller and footsteps database. Up here, hit play, look at it with that camera. Come on camera. Camera. Main camera. Delete. Okay. Very nice. We need to we've got some doors there. This is the demo. Okay. Very compact, which I like. Dungeon has a habit of sprawling out, and we really need to sort out doors. Doors is important. Chests are important. Frames per second are important as well, because it's very dodgy frames per second. Interaction with objects is important, and getting our own torches, but I suppose we could just grab one of those torches and use that as, just whack that on as what we're carrying. Right, okay, so, and there's no escape functionality either, which we need to add. Okay, so that was the first person demo. Bit underwhelming, but what we need to do, configuration, no, we're in the wrong place. We get multi-story dungeons, dungeon presets there, demo, first person, save changes, sure, we probably should change it, save it as, save as, scenes, and we'll call this FPS 1 demo 1, no dungeon. Okay. Now we're going to go into multi-story dungeons, dungeon presets, demo, and now when we hit play, hopefully, yeah, there we are, got a lovely looking dungeon, but we've got no first person camera, so let's get rid of that. 3 footsteps, no, first person, we put the footsteps database in and the first person in. And one of the key things we're going to do is try to create our own dungeon from just this preset one, although this preset is very cool. Put first person controller somewhere little like that. Right, and we really need some footsteps because it must just feel like that one. And we're going to change the dungeon layout. We're going to times by 2, 2, and 2. I find it a bit too cramped and claustrophobic. And the other thing is we're going to add footsteps database. We're going to add a new texture. So register textures, add component. No, there's 6. And we need to find the texture. Atlas base. Atlas base 1 is the texture for most of the stuff. So go back to the database. Don't remember where it is. First person database. First person controller. Footsteps database. Right, so there we are, that's some texture at space. We'll just plug that in. No, we've got to actually get the texture for it. So it's not the material, it's the actual texture for the material. Footsteps database. And at space, we'll stick that in there. There we go. That should mean that's great, but we want sound. We don't want sand, we want concrete. And we can put that on stone. Not the best footsteps, they're a little bit funky. And we've also got to deal with open areas. With the first person, we've got to understand the camera movement. Right, I'm going to put in my code as a matter of urgency. So let's add that to import new asset. New asset or package? Probably package. Dungeons. Let's go there. FPS counter 2. Open that. Import. and we're going to drag the FPS counter onto the first person controller, and that gives us some basic functionality that will extend later. So F, but the most important thing it does is when I hit escape, it just gets me out. And we can change that to pause if we need to, rather than just out. This also gives us escape to get out business. You hit escape to get out. So right, how do we go about creating our own dungeon rather than just using the preset one? Well, I cover that later on. For now, I'm just going to move on to have a look at Dwarven Expedition. Let me save this before we go. We save it. File, save as, scenes, dungeon, test one. I don't know if I've mentioned Atom. Atom's a very good dark-based text editor IDE. So, right, that's that one. And now we're going to go into Dwarven Expedition, scenes. What have we got? Examples, prefabs. We'll have a look at example. There we go. Yeah, that's great. Nothing particularly world-shattering here. All it is a bunch of things, but the thing that's really good is these materials. So if we do a new scene, file, new scene, and say we create 3D object, cube, change it to 10 by, by 1, by 10, maybe 50 that way. What we can do is then we can texture this. We've now got access to some really cool stone textures. Stone tile, there we go. That one we do. Go to the tile set. And what we do is Control D, duplicate it. If we're going to mess with it. So drag that on there. Okay. Oh, yeah, that one there. One. And tiling is the important thing. So not secondary. 10. 10. No. 1. That's quite cool. 2. Quite cool. 3. Just see how it goes. We don't want it to anything between, say, right now, anything between 1 and 4, maybe 3, 2, 1, 5. So we've instantly got very, very cool textures that we can use. And if you really like his work, show him some love and then buy his full pack and then even more. And he is working on creating an integration with Dungeon. And so there's a basic corridor, and we can have a crossroads, and we can draw all sorts of things just from having a really cool texture to play with. There's also cool textures in dungeons as well, Multistory dungeons have cool textures. I think that's the biggest thing you can get from the Dwarven Expedition, is just accessing beautiful textures. So we'll call that scenes Dwarven test 1. Okay. Then we're moving on. I'm not going to spend too long on each one. This one's a bit more interesting, this first game kit. So let's have a look at the demo 6. Right, this one has a moving camera, but we might just stick our camera in. I've got some lovely blue lighting there. I mean, it's a little bit dated, we'll probably have to do something about it. We've got a particle system there, which is very cool. Put some butterflies in. We've got some quite decent mist, although it's a little bit, when you run through it, we've got an interesting red thing going on there. Basically, we've got some corpses, have we? Or not? We've got a statue, we've got some statues. It's basically a scene, a graveyard scene that we could play around with and stick in a dungeon. It's very cool. And again, a whole bunch of new textures. And it just gives a taste of what he's got. He's got an awful lot of different scenes. They're very cool, very interesting, especially for making dungeons. Needs a bit of work to, I think, do something with them, but in general, very cool. Definitely a level of usefulness, that's for sure. Okay, and more scenes. I think that's all we've got with the demo. Lots of prefabs. Rock's always nice. Okay, so that gets us up and going with a whole load of prefabs ready to go to just put into a scene and start making scenes. One of the things I have to say is that when you actually start making your own scene, as opposed to using other people's assets, is light support tool and particle assistance. When you make your own scene, it does get very time consuming to place everything. It's yeah, it's definitely a whole job in itself. As is a lot. We're skating over an awful lot of things, which previously you'd have to have a whole team of people doing, and one of the teams would be level design. And in particular, you'd have you could have one person creating textures, one person creating models, bring them together, the models and the textures, and then you've got them dressing the scene, creating the scene, putting the scene down, and you've got play testers, and you have to add like the first person controller, which we could do, see if it works. So we grab first person, drag it in, drag in the controller, the code, my little code there. Right, escape and get rid of the main camera. There we are. It's a whole different experience when you start walking around it. Oh, we've got gliders as well, so we've got to do things. It's nice. We need spooky music, and we're going to cover spooky music. And put the footsteps in again for this grass. Should I do the footsteps again? Probably an idea. So we go to the footsteps database. We add another texture 6. Enter, and then we find this texture. Oh, this is going to be tricky because it's a terrain-based texture, but it's still somewhere around here. We're going to find the texture. Just to make sure we don't paint it. What's that height? Paint texture. There we go. We've got multiple textures. Right. So we may need to add for each one, but I'll just do. I should do the grass one. Or I'll do this one, ground one. Okay. So go to the database. Inspector. Database. What's it called again? Dust. We called it dirt texture. There we go. Ground. We can add a few more, but let's see if that works. Okay. We're going to need to add a few more textures to this one. We've got the ground and we'll have that as size, so we'll do another, I don't know, so we'll add a few more. So we've got ground, next one. Okay. But, dirt, concrete. Actually, we'll do a few more just to make sure we covered all of them. 10. Right. We should really have a grass sound as well. I'm going to provide that. Okay. That's the wrong. That's what we don't want dirt. So hit play. Yeah, footsteps really do help. Having texture-based footsteps is such a good idea. I suppose we need we need another texture for when we jump on things. Yeah, so that was just a key overview of everything. So we've gone a very fast look at dungeon. Well, we'll go through them in order. So, but footsteps, 3 footsteps by Pavel, dungeon. Quickly moving on to multi-story dungeons, dwarven expedition, and my first fantasy game, which is called LFG or something, the group, whatever. So we've got an awful lot of assets there to get on with and create our own things. We're going to put some of this stuff into dungeon, and yeah, I hope you found that interesting, and we'll go over into a lot more detail later on in the course. Bye bye for now.